All right, let me get to my first topic, and that is the debt. Take a listen to the Deputy Treasury Secretary, Wally Adeyemo.
I want to play something that Speaker McCarthy said back in January on this very issue.
Why wouldn't we sit down and talk, and especially with something as serious as debt, but as serious as a debt limit? Why would you want to wait till the end?
That was 4 months ago, and here we are without a deal in hand. So if the threat from default is so dire, why did the president wait until this month to have real negotiations about how to and where to have spending cuts in order to avert default?
Important to remember the president didn't wait. The president outlined his own plan for what we would do in terms of fiscal policy in March, where he talked about reducing the debt by $3 trillion by cutting things like subsidies to oil and gas companies. The speaker wasn't able to get a plan through the House until the end of April.
My first guest is the CEO and Chief Global Strategist of Euro Pacific Capital, Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff, well, first of all, what does that mean when he says cutting subsidies? The way the Democrats speak about oil and natural gas, you'd think that they were handing them free money, just because like it's welfare.
Yeah, no, these cuts were basically an illusion as far as the $3 trillion that gentleman was referring to. You know, when the Biden administration proposed the budget and claimed that there were $3 trillion in cuts, none of those cuts took place really during his term. They were all cuts that were supposed to take place, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now, which don't even count. Plus, they weren't even cuts in the sense that most people think about cuts. They were reductions in the planned rate of increase. So instead of increasing spending by X, they proposed increasing it by somewhat less than X. But it was in the future. In fact, the budget that counted, which was the current fiscal year, because that's the only one that really matters, the deficits increased. So the whole thing was BS, because if we can't pay the bills, which we obviously can't, because if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're going to default. That's an admission that we're broke. The only way we can pay the bills is if we borrow more money. But if we can't borrow, then we have to default on what we owe. So we're basically bankrupt, and we're admitting that. But if we're in this fiscal predicament, if we're going to grow the deficit by an even larger amount in the current year, how is that any kind of solution to the problem? It exacerbates the problem.
Well, that's why when they always say, well, this is about spending that was already approved by Congress. Yeah, but you're raising that limit. You're not saying, okay, we're going to claw back some of that foreign aid or claw back some of that COVID money, or we're going to cut spending for the next year and take what's left over and put it down to the debt. They're saying, okay, now we're going to go from 31.5 to 33 trillion. And then in a year and a half from now, we're going to be at 36 or 37. Representative Jody Arrington, the chair of the Budget Committee, says we're on track to be at 50 trillion in less than a decade.
It doesn't matter if they committed to making those payments in the past. We didn't have the money. They never should have made those commitments. There was a debt ceiling at the time that they made those commitments. And so if we don't have the money, then we need to go back and unwind those commitments. We need to cut government spending. We need to tell people, we were going to give you all this money, but we're broke. We don't have it. And so we have to reduce spending. And that way we can, avoid default. They keep saying that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we have to default. We don't have to default. The amount of interest that we owe is actually relatively small still compared to all the spending. So there's plenty of tax revenues to cover the interest if they want to prioritize that. What they have to do, though, is cut back on some other spending. But what the Biden administration is saying is we won't cut anything. So the first thing we're going to cut is paying interest on our debt. I mean, they're basically telling all the bondholders that you're the low man on the totem pole, that if anything goes wrong, you're not getting paid. And that's really not going to instill any confidence in our creditors.
Put on your gold hat for a second, gold, silver, platinum, whatever. When you hear people say, let's just mint a coin worth $1 trillion, it's like, are you serious? It's like throwing down the gun in a horror movie.
They're talking about taking an ounce of platinum and giving it to the Federal Reserve. And an ounce of platinum is worth, $1,000. I forget the price of platinum, more than 1,000, but it's less than the price of gold. And just giving that to the Federal Reserve to put on its balance sheet and have the Federal Reserve issue it $1 trillion. I mean, this would just, further bankrupt the Federal Reserve, which would basically have an asset that nobody would want. Who the hell is going to want $1 trillion platinum coin in exchange, that pays no interest? It's like a zero coupon bond that pays no interest for eternity. It has no value to anybody, but it would basically expose the fraudulent nature of what it's doing, that we're just a banana republic, that we really don't have an independent Federal Reserve, that we're just going to inflate until the dollar is completely worthless. And so I think if they actually followed through with that harebrained scheme, that would be very bad for the dollar. It would be very bad for the bond market. It would push interest rates up much higher, and it would drag the American standard of living much lower.
You think it's too late for a lot of people to get into gold in the kind of way that would protect them? Is it
Not even close. Not even close to too late. Gold is barely above $2,000 an ounce. Gold is still cheap. Gold was just below $2,000 an ounce in 2011. How many things can you still buy at a lower price than in 2011? I mean, go to the grocery store, see how much more things cost, but you can buy gold for less. So it's not even close to being too late to buying gold. And, by the way, just to point out, all this talk about the debt ceiling, they say, oh, we got to raise the debt ceiling because America always pays its bills. That is a lie. The reason we have all this debt is because America never pays its bills because it can't. And because we're too broke to pay our bills, we have to borrow more money. And so we have to raise the debt ceiling so we can continue to not pay our bills. The best thing that we could do is leave the debt ceiling in place so that finally, after all of these years, we have to figure out a way to pay our bills.
Yeah, we were calling it a crisis at $13 trillion. We're now $20 trillion past that. And I'm going to run out of time here, but I'm just going to go on that with government running education and the stupidity of most of our media, most people can't conceive of what $20 trillion is. So it just sounds like some number, and they assume the smart people in Washington will figure it out. Look, it can never happen here, whatever, default, and they'll figure it out, and I'll get my food stamps or something. It's frightening how illiterate millions of people are in this country when it comes to this issue.